voice of God like we get from Zoom. So we are recording. I hope that's cool. I'm gonna share my screen to get us started. Okay, that's nightmare fuel. There we go. Okay, welcome everybody. Dynamics Virtual Marketo Users Group for September 2025. Glad you're here. A lot of familiar faces, faces and names. A few new folks. Welcome. As usual, we do have our typical house rules. We do try really hard to keep the users groups a very safe space for people to be able to ask questions, share use cases, and really be open in a way that helps to ensure that this isn't a place for you to pitch or sell your product or harvest lists, that sort of thing. So we do ask that you be respectful of that and not share users group information, questions, or contact user members without their permission. So appreciate you participating in that. As I mentioned, we are recording today's session. This will be posted on YouTube after the recording has processed following this call. So anything that you want to go back to, it'll be there. I will also reserve some time at the end in the Q&A portion where I will turn off the recording. So if you do have questions that you don't want to bring up and have out there, we'll keep that available. But at any time during the call, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box, come off mute. This is meant to be a learning opportunity for you. So let's make it informal, casual, and really give you the opportunity to get what you need out of it. So a few quick updates. September 18th, Marketo is having their Marketo and Mochas, kind of like a coffee chat type training. You'll see on here, this upcoming session includes Charlie Oakham, who presented for us 2 weeks ago here on the Dynamics mug, but with a focus on AI with Marketo. So definitely something worth checking out. If you are new to Marketo, have somebody on your team who is new to Marketo, and you're looking to really get started with some foundations, there is a new foundational Marketo users group available to be a resource. So if you've got some folks that are newer to their journey, strongly recommend checking this out. It is designed for a newer member to the Marketo ecosphere, but a great opportunity to connect with peers that are at that same level. If you are still new to the Marketo email designer that was rolled out this year, there are a couple of courses and sessions that are coming out on that. As that continues to evolve in its features and functionality. The last call out that I had is the Adobe Experience Maker Awards. Those are coming up again this year. Submissions are due by October 17th. So as of right now, that gives you about a month to be able to take a look at your awards, different categories, consider where you or your team may be a good fit. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out. 2023, my organization was an Adobe finalist for the Engager category, and I was the winner of the Ambassador Award category. So I've been through this process. Happy to help answer questions, support you on anything that you're looking for that, but definitely something that I recommend. It's a great opportunity. The gala is phenomenal. And definitely something worth celebrating the work that you and your team are doing. Now for our session today, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Andrew Josephs and Megan Jaworski to present for us today, and really excited what they've got on the agenda for you today, including some great giveaways. So we're going to encourage participation on this. So if you do want to come on camera and off mute, awesome. Chat. I know Thad, yours isn't letting you. That's totally cool. I'm going to be here to help keep an eye on chat and keep everything flowing. So I'm going to turn it over to Megan and Andrew to get us going for today. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Brooke. Hey, Oh yeah, you got the screen. Perfect. So we're excited to share for this session. We wanted to talk about some tips and tricks for running a successful Marketo Dynamics integration. So did want to mention at the front that we know some people on this call may already be integrated. So we hope some of the tips in here are still relevant to you. But super excited to kind of share some of our experience. And I know there's a lot of very smart people on this call too. So I'm sure we all have stories and other tips that we can share among ourselves. So just to give us a little introduction, my name's Megan. I am a manager of digital and technology at Global Prey, which is a B Corp and an agency. So I have worked within marketing technology for over 7 years and have worked in both agency and in-house roles, mainly supporting financial and healthcare industries. I recently, just a little bit more about me personally, but recently became a mom this year in February, and that's been a really fun journey for me. I saw a abbreviation, MOPS, for mother preschoolers, so I'm excited to adopt that new title in the near future. And when I'm not working, I enjoy just being with my family, going on walks in sunny Florida where we live, always cooking and trying new things. So excited to be here.
Thanks, Megan. I'll introduce myself. My name is Andrew Josephs. My friends call me AJ, though. And if you've done a Marketo and Dynamics integration, then we are definitely friends. So you can call me AJ. It can be a little bit challenging that I'm sure that we've all experienced. I've been working in marketing ops for about 10 years, done 3 Marketo and Dynamics integrations. And when not doing marketing operations, I'm the captain of my beach volleyball team. Big victory last night. Feeling a little sore this morning, but we got it done. Thanks everyone for joining. Before we start, we have a couple of trivia questions, icebreakers, like Brooke mentioned. Feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat. We'll be giving away a few giving cards, which is we email you a gift card and then you can use that to donate to your favorite charity. So I thought that would be a fun way to get some participation. So our first one is, what best describes your current stage in the Marketo Dynamics integration process? Haven't even started, just getting prepared, in the thick of it, need help. The integration has been running for years and just getting familiar with it. Or you're already an expert and just want to learn how to optimize the integration. Just curious where everybody is in their process. Robin hasn't even started yet. A, C. Okay, so it looks like a good mix. So hopefully this will be helpful if you experience in Dynamics or starting fresh. So we broke this into 3 sections, basically before integration, during, and after integration. And wanted to highlight some tips and tricks of getting started. The first thing that I found that's most important is understanding your dynamic setup, whether that's on-prem or cloud. So does that mean that it's local or in the cloud? And then how do you sign on? Is it S to S, server to server, or ROPC? And the reason why this is so important is because the Adobe documentation is different for each version. Now, you might think that they're the exact same, and then when you get to the certain part, it just subs in one paragraph or another, but they actually are very different. And I've had cases where we're going down one, and then we realize that we have a different type of setup, so we have to kind of start over. So understanding that ahead of time is crucial. Another important aspect is auditing Marketo and Dynamics. I would say the majority of the time, organizations either already have Marketo going and are moving to Dynamics, or vice versa, are already on Dynamics and moving to Marketo. I think some people might be starting fresh from both, which is interesting. I haven't seen that before, but really understanding if one of those systems is already using, how is it being used? For Marketo, what type of programs, what's your database size, how are your operational programs set up. Then on the dynamic side, understanding that setup, who are the end users, how are leads qualified, things like that. Next, want to start to define use cases. So obviously you're not integrating Marketo and Dynamics for fun. there's a business case for it. So really drilling into maybe your 2 or 3 primary use cases to better understand why you're doing this integration, and then you can build the rest of this integration roadmap off there. Some other things that we like to add into the roadmap, in addition to use cases, are a data dictionary that makes sure that everyone is speaking the same language. I think the best example of that is when you talk to a CRM admin and you say lead, that means something very different in Marketo than CRM. In CRM, you can have a lead and a contact. In Marketo, everything's a lead. So you want to get on the same page there to make sure that you're talking the same language. And you don't have to be prescriptive and say every time it has to be a lead, but just to know that there might be some differences. Another thing to identify beforehand is which fields to sync. A lot of times I've seen people get hung up on this. You know, you have your 4 main objects. They could have hundreds of fields and you're wondering, oh, am I ever going to need this field or not? You can always add fields later. What I like to do when I'm first doing my integration is just do the 4 or 5 bare minimum fields that you need to sync for testing. And then you can always go back later and add more. And then the last one, which we'll get into more detail later, is test cases, being very prescriptive with what you're trying to test, who initiates it, what the expected outcome is, how you're going to do the test, and then the results. And doing all of this upfront is really going to help you stick to your timelines and have a successful integration. So as much as you can document beforehand, the better. Next, who's involved in setting those expectations? So this is a big project that involves a lot of different groups. I'm sure the majority of us here are probably the Marketo admins, but these other groups all could play a role, whether that's the CRM admin, marketing lead, data and analytics, business users. Is this going to be a call center? Is it going to be a sales team? And also sometimes security. If you're working in an international organization, maybe your local CRM admin has some privileges, but not all of them. So it can get into a lot of red tape and a lot of politics. And if you can bring all those people together, that's really helpful. And clearly defining who's going to do the work, what their work entails, and when it will happen will help you stay on task. These integrations usually take multiple months, and not setting this up beforehand is going to lead to delays, which then is going to impact the business, which then is going to come back and reflect poorly on you. So setting up frequent touch base to review those roadblocks, also celebrating successes, finding little things along the way where you hit a new milestone is nice, and then also tracking those upcoming deadlines. So once you have that established, I think the next best thing to think about is your sync approach. So going from left to right, left is a custom integration. So that means that it's not using anything that Adobe gives you. You're either having developers build this or going with a middleware. Going with this approach has a lot of benefits, but also some cons. So the benefits are that it's very customizable. You can set what you want to do and not dependent on Adobe for that. The downside is that it takes a high level of effort if you're developing yourself or using a third party to do it, and the associated costs that go with it. Next, we have the native connector. That's what we call kind of the Adobe version of the connection. When you start your integration, you'll download a package from Marketo, send it to your CRM admin, and have them upload it. Native connection with a sync filter, that means that you are not syncing all of the leads or all of the contacts. You're putting on that filter to say which ones you want to bring to Marketo. That can have a lot of benefits. If you have a massive CRM database and your Marketo database is smaller, you might not want to bring everybody in. If you're only working in one country, you don't want to bring in the other regions. That's another reason. You have to be very specific with your field though. New _ sync to Marketo. That's the exact API field name that it needs in order to see the filter. You also want to set everything to false initially. If you leave it as null, Marketo doesn't have a null. It either is true or false. That will then bring people down. The sync will get broken and it's going to cause issues down the road. And the last one, the most simple one would be a native connector with no sync filter. So that means you're using Adobe's connection and you're bringing everybody into your system. So you don't have as much control, but you also have less to set up. So it really depends on what your use cases are and how big your systems are of which approach you want to do. I would say the native connector with the sync filter is probably the most common, but if you need to do more custom, there's only so much you can do with that. You might look into some sort of middleware. Then I wanted to think about coming from a Salesforce perspective. I personally had done Salesforce integrations before I moved to Dynamics, and the Salesforce and Marketo integration works beautifully, works better than Salesforce Sales Cloud connection to their own products, which is nice. But there's definitely a lot of gotchas that you would think if it was your first time that would work in Dynamics, and just wanted to call them out. The first bucket is converting leads to contacts. If you're using the out-of-the-box conversion, then this works great. You have a lead, you convert them to a contact. In Marketo, you just have one record, and the Microsoft type changes from lead to contact. However, if you have customizations on there, that flipping of the record from lead to contact won't work, and it will create a duplicate. That's going to impact your reporting if you're doing multi-touch attribution. There are workarounds, of course, but it's just something to know that if your conversion is doing anything custom, then that's not going to work. Next one is campaigns. I think when people start with Dynamics, they think, oh, I'll have my business users build a campaign, it'll sync down to Marketo, and then I'll drop these people into a nurture, send them an email. Unfortunately, in this integration, it doesn't work that way. So you can add members from Marketo to a Dynamics campaign, but those are the only ones in Marketo that you're going to be able to see. So if that's the way that you're planning on doing segmentation, it's not going to work. And we can go into ways that we've gotten around that future, but just think that's a good call out. You can also remove members from a campaign, but again, that's only the ones that Marketo has added to those campaigns. You also can't sync a program to a campaign. The last one is MSI, Marketo Sales Insights. This was built for Salesforce. You can do it in Dynamics. You're just going to have a little bit less visualization options and customizations. So there's best bets and priority lists, the stars and the flames. I know when I was on the sales side, that was the first thing I would look at. And you can use the default version, but you won't be able to kind of move that around to what your targets are as much. So just a few call outs if you're coming from Salesforce into Dynamics. Yeah, I'll hand it back to Megan.
Awesome. Thanks, AJ. So we'll jump into our second trivia question. How have you prepared to start or enhance your integration? So we have 4 options again. I've decided on my sync approach. I've defined my use cases. I've created documentation. So that could include your data dictionary, testing roadmap, field mapping. I've done none of these things, but I'm adding them to my to-do list. So we'll give people a few minutes. And again, there are some giving cards up for grabs. So any participation gets you closer to getting some of those. Cool. Well, we've got some good answers. So now we want to jump into the next phase, which is during the integration. So first phase, it was a lot of planning, getting people involved, mapping out your road to success. So now it's just activating on that plan. So for this section, we'll go through some of those different pieces that you plotted and planned and how you can activate on them successfully. And we're sharing some tips from our experience of things that have worked well, just for anyone getting started or for those who are in the thick of it. If you're looking to optimize your sync, these are some things that we've seen bring some success. So when it comes to field mapping, the first thing that we just want to echo is creating the minimal number of fields that you need that are required for the integration will help you eliminate any bloat that you might have in your sync processing time as you're getting started. So I think Brooke added in a commentary of, some places have 15,000 fields or just a lot of fields, and you don't need all that information. So starting with what's the bare minimum, you can always add more, is the first thing that we would add. Just building on that too, the integration sync time runs similar to Salesforce, where you have those 5-minute sync cycles, but depending on how much data is being processed, it can be significantly delayed. So when you're getting started, making sure that that's pretty efficient is always helpful, so that you can run test cases pretty seamlessly and just make sure things are working as expected. So here we have pictured a field or a screenshot from the field mapping in the integration roadmap. So we kind of have what fields you would create. So outlining the category of the field, field names, types, how important it is, understanding which systems will be updating the field, the level of access needed, and then anticipated formats are super critical details to make sure that you can get these built out and build them out efficiently for the future. And then also, if you are already running an existing integration, just understanding the number or the volume of records who have fields populated is helpful to know in advance, so you can set expectations around processing time. So just mapping out all these details in the beginning of the process makes it a lot easier when it comes time to build. Additionally to that, we certainly recognize that some use cases require data to be shared between two platforms. So understanding which platform will be managing those field updates will help eliminate any stress or confusion in the future. If there is a random value you're seeing in the field and it's not what you had originally aligned on, you can clean that up and kind of go back to this as your Bible of sorts for how things should be coming across. And of course, if new use cases arise, you can certainly append this to that. So custom objects, as mentioned, this integration or dynamics can be so custom. So I think Salesforce is similar. You can customize it a lot, but the integration with Marketo is really strong. So there's not much you need to do to get answers to the questions you're looking for. However, with Dynamics, there's some workarounds or additional setup that needs to be done to get the functionality you're looking for. So with custom objects, our tip is don't go searching for these. These use cases will surface on their own, especially with this integration, but understanding that they're really helpful when you do have a situation arise where you need to have a one-to-many relationship is just critical in helping planning and making sure that you are set up for success with your integration down the road. So outlining how these custom objects will support the identified use cases and mapping out those relationships just make sure that you have clear direction going into development. And here we have a screenshot of some custom objects that had been identified for a specific client we were supporting. And we identified, the description, which details will be included, and then also understanding how you'll be activating on this data in Marketo. So if you're going to need to trigger messages based off of some of these updates, having the custom object be available as a trigger or constraint is just helpful to identify up front so that you have all those things set up and planned for. So again, you don't need to search for these things, and I'm sure there's could be a whole session on custom objects, but if they do arise, it's good to plot them out this way, but you don't need to go searching for custom object use cases. So testing, I think this is where we have a lot of experience because once you get everything set up, you really need to go through all of the motions to make sure it's working as you would plan it to. So when you're testing, one of our tips is to balance live and remote testing. So this just allows you to validate the sync behavior, but also being mindful of time. Knowing sync cycles do take some time, and depending on the environment you're working in, it could take longer than others. So one thing that has proven to be helpful is just prepping as much as you can ahead of any testing sessions. And that way, when you hop on the phone with your CRM admin, you're just analyzing the results and looking for things that went wrong, or making sure the results that you were expecting did go as you planned them to. Repeating test cases in both environments. So we know sandbox and production, when you're talking about Marketo, are not mirrors of each other. They're two separate instances. So you do need to test in both because they don't act the same. So this is really critical to make sure things are reliable across both environments. And then, as we know, with them being separate, you do need to rebuild many times. But one of the tips is there is an import feature within Marketo that allows you to process or copy what programs you built in Sandbox into production. Just some notes on that is, if you have fields that you set up in Sandbox and you don't have them in production, if you do that import, you'll get some errors. So just need to make sure you have everything kind of built out so that you can copy and paste that. And that should save some time. You will still need to go in and make tweaks, of course, just based off of the different environments. And then lastly, monitor the sync timing and delays across environments. So we all know that certain things need to be, some tasks need to happen before others. So understanding how your sync timing works and making sure that there's delays where there need to be, so that, things are tagged accordingly before they're passed off to sales, is really critical. And then we have included here just a screenshot of a testing roadmap. So for every test case, we'll provide an ID, categorize the test. So based off of our use cases, we'll use that to help define that category, including a description. So what is it that you're trying to achieve? The prerequisites, that's where you can identify your to-dos before meeting. And then notating here which system will be controlling the test. So some you'll need to trigger from Marketo, others you'll trigger from Dynamics. You should obviously be checking both, but understanding who's going to take the first step there. And then outlining all the steps and the expected results. So this just makes sure that you're kind of thinking everything through before you jump on the phone and start kind of doing different things. And I know this has helped a lot, especially there's always people who have different ways of working, but when there's steps outlined, anybody who's, jumping into the project can help support if, your CRM admin is dealing with a critical business issue. So this is just really helpful to make sure that testing can keep progressing and that everybody knows what the results are. So one thing I wanted to call out here for tips is adding to your sync a field that will just streamline testing. So when you're talking about those bare minimum fields, this is one that you should include in your sync. So just for context, the GUID is what is used in this integration to dedupe records. So it's the unique key that's used on the Marketo log to make sure that all the tracking, all the information from records is passed back and forth without creating a duplicate. So when you're testing in Marketo, or if you're used to Marketo, you'll often use the person ID or email as keys to validate testing results. But when you add in this integration, or when you're supporting this integration, GUID is what you want to use to validate your results. So adding this into your sync right away will just help any headaches down the road as you're talking to your CRM admin. So we've highlighted here what that field name is, and it isn't GUID or anything you might expect. It's called contact, but that contains the ID that you can use to identify your test records and validate results as you're going through your integration. Great. So the third trivia question we have here, how often do you and your CRM team connect? So we talk every day, that's option A. We have a regular touch point scheduled, that's option B. We only meet when we need to, that's option C. Or D, we don't talk. Right. Well, good. It looks like everybody's talking with their CRM team, so that's great.
I was really hoping we weren't going to see any D's on that.
That was true. No D's, so that's good. Okay, so now you have your integration established, you have your documentation. So what are some things you can do to keep this running smoothly? So tip is you created the documentation. It's only so good as it is kept current. So updating it to reflect any current use cases or changes. And these can be done, periodically. We do see a lot of headaches removed when there's ongoing syncs with your CRM team. So updating as you're having those discussions is really helpful to identify new needs, address issues. And having that ongoing touch point is super helpful too. So as you're seeing, changes in your integration, you're identifying a trend with different notifications or errors you're seeing, you can discuss those there as well. So we have kind of some ideas of things that you can discuss during that meeting, but really just to capture any feedback and keep your sync running current. This isn't a project that is one and done. It's something you're always going to be staying on top of, managing, improving, changing. So just having that ongoing collaboration is super helpful. So next, staying on top of errors and notifications. And I did see Adobe even put out a quick video on this today. So if you haven't seen that, that might be something helpful to reference. But regularly reviewing the sync status, error and notifications tab, and then duplicates and deleted records is super helpful to maintaining system health. So these are a few screenshots of places you can go within Marketo to monitor these things. You'll see here from the errors are not always the most helpful, so they do require some further digging. How we've managed to stay on top of that is we'll often have logs that we update on a weekly basis just to kind of categorize some of the things we're seeing and then dig in, especially if they're applying more broadly. So if we're seeing hundreds of records have a error message and it's a significant one, that gives us enough fuel to prioritize that with our CRM admin. So that's just one way we've gone about it. And also you do need to dig deeper, as I said, because the error doesn't always give you the clearest direction of what to do. And then sync status here. So this will give you a snapshot of how many records are being processed within the last hour. So you can take a look and see how many updates are being made. And then it also includes the direction, which is helpful. So you can see if things are coming into Marketo or coming out from Marketo to be shared with Dynamics. So that information is really helpful too, especially as you're diagnosing some of the sync delays and processing issues. And when you're testing, this is a tab we'll typically have opened up just so we can see how many updates are being processed. Is that the number of test records that we had planned to process? So this is just another really helpful place to stay on top of as you're managing your instance.
Okay, I'll wrap it up and then save some time for questions. So in summary, document as much as you can before your integration. And it's not too late to create documentation now if it doesn't exist. Drilling in there could help reveal why you are having certain issues. Maybe you and the CRM team aren't seeing things eye to eye. So that is a good tip. Understanding those differences between Salesforce and Marketo, set those expectations early. So then when you're in the middle of it and tell the business, hey, you can create campaigns and then I'll send them nurture emails. Well, it's not going to be that easy. Syncing what's necessary to start, just so that you can get in there and test. You can always add fields later. Don't let that bog you down and have debates. I don't think there's any marketing campaigns that are getting triggered off middle names, but I know some people want to include all the fields that they have. And then some helpful resources. Unfortunately, this integration is more rare than with Salesforce, so there's definitely not as much information out there. Some things that we've used is the MoPro Slack. There's a Dynamics channel, which we're probably all in there. Marketo community, Adobe support. I would say Adobe support with this can be a little hit or miss. Not everybody knows the Dynamics integration, but if you keep pushing, usually you'll get to someone who can help you, and then the Dynamics community. That's all we had prepared. I hope that was helpful for everyone.
That was awesome. Thank you both. I did want to add to the documentation piece. One thing that I found really helpful in my own documentation really is Zoom. I'm way better at recording something while I'm doing it in a 2 to 3 minute segment, even with some voiceover, and just dropping that video somewhere, but especially with Zoom transcriptions and then throwing it into AI and saying, hey, turn this into a technical document for me, has been really, really helpful. So if you have not been doing that or are doing that, highly recommend leveraging those tools for it. So question from Catherine, do you have an integration checklist for Marketo and Dynamics?
Yeah, so I think, AJ, I don't know if you wanted to start.
Go ahead.
So that roadmap is really kind of our checklist of all the things to take a look at. There's definitely the core Adobe documentation that covers kind of the foundation of what you need to make sure that native connector is set up accurately. But that integration roadmap is kind of our Bible of like, here's all the things we know we need as part of it. We know we need fields. We know we need to test. So I think we are happy to kind of share the pieces and parts of that. And Catherine, we have some examples too, if you're just getting started, that we could happily share too.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. Well, thank you both. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and that way we've got some room for questions off the record as well.